Last week I made a video about a specification that many audio engineers didn't know about, at least from my perspective. I'll link that video over here. And because I saw a lot of misconception about loudness and loudness normalization, I thought, why not make a second video explaining what it is about, how I am handling it, and answering some common questions around it. So let's get started. So let's start at the basics. The term loudness basically means how loud somebody is perceiving a piece of audio. This could be music, this could be speech, this could be a movie, commercial breaks, whatever. We use the term to describe how loud somebody perceives something. Traditionally, we can measure level in the studio using VU meters, true peak meters, peak program meters, quasi-peak program meters, RMS meters. We have all kinds of different ways to measure volume. And the problem here is that we can level multiple tracks at the same volume, but have a huge difference in perception. And one of the things, and this was very common in the Netherlands, and I think in a lot of different countries, was that when watching television, the commercial break was a lot louder than the program that you were actually watching. And this is one of those examples where the volume level is the same, but the loudness and the perception of how loud it is different. And in order to tackle that, the first thing that we need is a way of measuring it. And that is where we use LUFS. So LUFS is a way of measuring how loud somebody perceives a piece of audio. LUFS stands for loudness units on the full scale. Now, the way that the LUFS measurement works is described in the ITU.1770. It is kind of a boring paper to read, but to recap, it's basically just a high-pass filter and a high-shelf filter combined with an RMS measurement and some gaining for surround speakers that are behind you. Because apparently we humans are a little bit more sensitive for sound coming from the back, and that is because we cannot see what is happening there. And something like that could help us back in the days when there would be like a tiger or something behind us, like a dangerous animal. But the way that LUFS are calculated goes a little bit further than that, and it's all in that paper, but I won't bore you with that because that would really affect my audience retention. Anyway, the second paper about loudness is the EBU-R128, and this is kind of an interesting read, but not necessarily if you are in the music industry. This paper was the first nail in the coffin for the loudness war, and this paper addresses equalizing the loudness on television. So this was a standard to tackle the loud commercial breaks, basically, and also making sure that all the material was on the same loudness level. And the cool thing about that is that all of a sudden people can now turn on their television and they don't need their volume control anymore because they can just, decide for themselves like how loud they want to have their television. And that brings us to the streaming services, because now that we have a way of reliably measuring how loud a piece of audio will be, the streaming services all of a sudden can improve user experience. Because these companies, these software companies, if it's Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, Deezer, whatever, these companies want to give the listener the best experience they can. And they do this in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways is by making sure that the listener has control over their volume. Or better said, over how loud they are listening to music. That there are no ups and downs in their playlists, in their song lists, in their whatever. So the thing that the streaming services are doing is something called loudness normalisation. So they are setting a standard. In the case of streaming services, at this point in time, it's minus 14 LUFS. So all the songs will be on the minus 14 LUFS level. Now, the cool thing about streaming services, and we're taking Spotify as an example because, as far as I know, it's the biggest one. The cool thing about these services is that they actually disclose what they're doing. If you go to their artists page, it's kind of an FAQ. I'll link it in the description down below. You can see exactly what they are doing and also their reasoning. Audio gets delivered to us at different volume levels. loudness levels, I would say. We use loudness normalization to balance soft and loud songs, creating a more balanced, uniform experience. There's a small note here that it doesn't work yet on web players and third-party devices. I think it's just a matter of time before it will work there as well. Now, as you can see here, they're super clear in what they're doing and how they are normalizing your music. So one of the things that they are doing is they are normalizing entire albums as one. So that means that if somebody plays back the album like from start to finish, and you made a track a little bit lower and another track a little bit higher in loudness because it's intended that way, they will keep that intact. They do not do that when you're shuffling the album or if it's in a playlist or something. So it's not a strategy to have like a high loudness track that you want to boost or push or something in between low loudness tracks in an album, because that will only work if they would listen to that entire album. I mean, basically every strategy that you can think of to stand out in terms of loudness will not work. And even if you find a way around it, I'm pretty sure that they will tackle that pretty quickly, because they want to create a more balanced and uniform experience for the listener, and the listener is actually the ones that we should care the most about, because the listener is the ones that basically decide if our hobby becomes our job. Positive or negative gain compensation gets applied to a track while it's playing. Negative gain is applied to louder masters, so the loudness level is minus 14 dB LUFS. I actually think that you can just say minus 14 LUFS. I don't think you need to say dB LUFS, because it's a loudness unit. This lowers the volume in comparison to the master. No additional distortion occurs. That's correct. Like, lowering the volume of something is just fine. And this is one of the misconceptions, I think, that I saw in the comment section underneath that video. It said, I don't have a problem with you mastering louder. But you have to know that Spotify and all other services will lower your volume, and that there could be some opportunities for you. That's everything that I want to say. If you want to stick to minus 5 LUFS, do it. No problem. But they will lower you, and there might be some opportunities. And I want to talk about that in a minute. Positive gain is applied to softer masters, so the loudness level is minus 14 LUFS. We consider the headroom of the track and leave 1 dB headroom for lossy encodings to preserve audio quality. So example, if a track loudness level is minus 20 dB LUFS and its true peak maximum is minus 5 dB FS, we only lift the track up to minus 16 dB LUFS. What this means is that if you are not using the full headroom, then Spotify will help you a little bit. What they're not going to do is add some extra gain or extra limiting to a track, because the problem is that the result will get very unpredictable. So if you are under minus 14 LUFS, you're in a dangerous zone. Like, one of the things that we all should know is that we should be above minus 14 LUFS all the time. Premium listeners can also choose volume normalization levels in the app settings to compensate for a noisy or quiet environment. They can set it to minus 11 LUFS. We set this level regardless of the maximum true peak. We apply a limiter to prevent distortion and clipping in soft dynamic tracks. The limiter is set to engage at minus 1 dB sample values, so not true peak values, with a 5 millisecond attack time and 100 millisecond decay time. And this also happens if you turn up the volume on your phone or something. Like it does more than just a limiter. Like, maximum volume on like phone speakers also tinkers with the audio, and I think that is just something that we have to learn to live with as audio engineers. If people really want to listen to loud tracks, then I mean, you're putting it in the hand of the listener then, so they have to accept if a track sounds a little bit less good then. Normal setting, and this is, I think, the setting that Spotify is at for 99% of the people that, just listen to music and enjoy it. Normal setting, minus 14 LUFS. And there's also quiet setting of minus 19 LUFS, which basically means just turning it down a little bit. So, mastering tips. Loudness normalization means we don't always play your tracks at the level it's mastered. Target the loudness level of your masters at minus 13 LUFS and keep it below minus 1 dB true peak max. This is best for lossy formats, and make sure that no extra distortion is introduced in the transcoding process. If your master is louder than minus 14 LUFS, make sure it stays below minus 2 dB true peak to avoid distortion. That is what they are recommending. We should listen to this. This is because louder tracks are more susceptible to extra distortion in the transcoding process. But the true peak was a different video. That was last week's video. Now, I saw that a lot of people were thinking that I was delivering all of my masters at minus 14 LUFS and all that kind of stuff, but that's not true. I still deliver streaming optimized masters at minus 9. Let me show you why. I've got a loudness meter here. This is the true level from Sonnable, but there are multiple meters. But this one shows a few very interesting stats. So one of the things that is interesting here to watch at is not just the LUFS, but also the dynamic range. A common misconception is that LUFS says something about the dynamic range of a track. And that's just not true. LUFS says something about the perceived loudness if the volume control would stay the same. It doesn't say anything about the dynamic range. And one of the things we are going to see in this measurement is that we are at around minus 14 LUFS. The meter hasn't seen the full track yet, but we are also at minus 3 dB true peak. So that means that we're not utilizing the maximum headroom that we have. So let me increase that to minus 1 dB true peak. And for that, I have to basically just gain up my limiter a little bit like this. And now you can see that we are starting to get in a better area. We are, at least for country music, we are in the greens for the dynamic range, and we are above minus 14 LUFS. However, we still have some range to work with, so we could boost this a little bit more to really be at the sweet spot of the dynamic range. So now you can see that our dynamic range is pretty much spot on, like we're in between this green, and we are above minus 14 LUFS. We are actually at minus 11 LUFS, which isn't minus 14 LUFS, as you can see. So don't be too focused on that minus 14 mark. Just know that you need to be above minus 14 and that the whole loudness thing doesn't matter above minus 14. So you have to make sure that your dynamic range is still, in the sweet spot. If you are too dynamic, it can be perceived as weird by your listener, which will end up in a bad listening experience. And again, we want to treat our listeners well. If your track is not dynamic enough, then that means that the track can be a bit tiring to your listener. Most certainly with loudness compensation turned on, if there is a track that is a little bit more dynamic and a track that is a little bit less dynamic, played back at the same volume level, I think that a lot of listeners would prefer the more dynamic track because they would feel it breathe. Now, I saw a few very interesting comments and a few very interesting discussions, and I just want to quickly give my take on these things. The first thing that I want to give my perspective on is the yes, but the client question. And this question is about okay, we audio engineers, we understand the standard, we know the benefits from it, but we have to send our audio to our client. They are going to play it back on their systems and will recognize that it's not as loud as a competitor's track. And this is difficult. This has always been difficult and will always be difficult in the future. One of the things to think about here is they hired you. They hired you because of your expertise. And you could see this as an opportunity to show your expertise and to explain to your client what is going on. I think that the biggest part of this problem is basically a communication problem. And one of the things that I started doing now is delivering loud masters as listen versions. And not super loud, but just, normal listen versions. And as soon as everything is done and the real mastering starts, I'm delivering a loud, I call it the traditional version, and a streaming optimized version. And by doing that, you are opening up the conversation with the client. because they see that second version and they are asking like, hey, what is going on here? And then you can explain like, hey, this is what is going on. This is how the streaming services work. And you can read more about this on the Spotify website. You can send them the loudness penalty website as well, so they can do their own tests and that kind of stuff. And the cool thing about this approach is that this has always resulted in more respect from my client, which is not something that I'm asking for, but you really, you can show your expertise. And because the client is still in control, like they can choose which version they want to upload, but also knowing what it is about, they will basically always make the right choice by uploading the streaming optimized version. So I think that you can twist this argument around into something very positive for not only for you as an engineer, but also for your client and again, the people that we are working for, the people that are listening. Another one that I saw is that, this is all cool, but music has always been loud. Like if we listen to music from the 90s or the zeros, it has always been loud. Yes, because that was the standard then. That was the way of working because there was no loudness normalization or something. So there was a need for it back then. Now there's no need to be loud anymore. Unless, and this was another comment that I got, that your music is supposed to be loud, is supposed to be crunched and whatever, and that it's part of the sound. And yeah, if that is your choice, like I won't haunt you for that or something. If you think that's a good idea, just do it. But think about something else. Like if you are comparing yourself against others, that means that there's a big chance that you are copying others. And if we look at music and looking at what it's all about, it's also about standing out, trying to make something unique. And this is one of the things that you could use to your advantage in that journey. Maybe if everybody is pumping up their music super loud in your genre, maybe you can try the opposite. You might actually stand out. I don't know. It's of course a small part of standing out. There's multiple things that you can do in music. Try to think about that. Like, is it really supposed to sound that loud? Or do you want to challenge that common opinion about your genre? And if you don't want to challenge and if you feel comfortable with that, and I mean, just know that you are being turned down by the streaming services. Now, another comment that I saw, and this is the last comment, is that I saw people saying like, yes, but the listener will turn off normalization. I can check now with a lot of people that I know, and I know that they all have it turned on. I'm just sure that they all have it turned on because they don't even know that they have it turned on. The people that turn it off are audio engineers, and they all have their reasons for it. Some people really want to, check audio at the levels that they were produced at or whatever. Doesn't really matter. But one of the things that I can get a little bit pissed about is people saying to unknowing listeners that they should turn off loudness normalization because it will sound better then. What are you saying? It won't sound better. It will just sound the same but louder. And the user experience will go down for that person. So if there's one thing that we all need to stop, then it is asking people to turn off loudness normalization. Like if you think that's a good idea, then explain why it is a good idea to ask people to turn off loudness normalization. Because I don't know. And I've seen influencers doing this. I've seen influencers, certain engineers on YouTube as well, saying that we should all turn off loudness normalization because then we would hear the music the way it was intended. Yeah, but we are still hearing the music the way it's intended because there is nothing happening. It's only a volume adjustment, which is something that the listener will do themselves if they turn off loudness normalization, because all of a sudden they have a louder track and they will turn down the volume themselves. So you're basically saying, turn that off and do it yourself? That's what you're saying. Anyway, that was a small rant. It wasn't intended as a rant, but this is really, from all the comments, this is the only one of which I think like, hey, everything that we're doing basically is okay. It's just okay. As long as we know about the standards, it's important to spread that message. That's also the reason why I made this design, this t-shirt, because I think by educating people and by having more people know about this standard, we can basically make better sounding productions, better audio, better engineering, better music, better everything. And this shouldn't be a dividing subject, and it shouldn't be such a heavy subject as it is right now, because discussions could be very heavy. I've seen on the internet. It's basically how the internet works and how the YouTube comment section works. It's getting heavy pretty quickly, but everything is fine. But just know that loudness normalization could be there to help you, and loudness normalization could be something that you could use to your advantage. That's just all I'm saying. And if you still want to deliver at -4 LUFS, just do it. I'm not going to say it's a good idea, but like if you think that's the best idea to do for your music, go ahead. You will just be turned down in volume by Spotify, and then everything will be fine. So it's not that big of a problem. Anyway, I can keep on repeating myself, but I think I've said enough. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to support my channel, you can check out the merchandise, the loudness merchandise that has the loudness standards printed on it. And you can spread the message using something like that, or just wear it because you think it's cool. You can also check out Thomann and Sweetwater. And if you want to buy something for your studio, make sure to use my affiliate links. They're also in the description down below. Another way to support the channel is by checking out my Patreon campaign, which I'll link over here, or joining on YouTube using the YouTube memberships feature. I'm making sure that the content is the same on both, so there's no need to sign up to both. I'll link a playlist with the exclusive content for members over here, and I'll link just an interesting video if you want to watch something else on my channel over here. Thanks a lot for watching, keep pushing, and bye bye.